The sky above planet Veller turned red as Ethan's shuttle came spinning down. Warning lights flashed all around him. Smoke filled the cockpit. The controls didn't answer anymore. He grabbed the straps tight and braced for impact. Then everything went black. When he opened his eyes, the shuttle was broken. Metal twisted like paper. Sparks flew from the control panel. His arm burned. His leg was bleeding. Outside, the land was dark, filled with strange twisted trees and glowing fog. He knew where he had crashed, the forbidden zone. No one came back from this place. Ethan crawled out of the wreckage, every move painful. He held his side, trying not to scream. The ground felt wet. His boots sank into black mud. The trees above looked like claws. He couldn't hear any birds, just a strange soft hum in the air. As he limped forward, he saw shadows move between the trees. Were they animals? Or worse, suddenly, a voice came from the darkness. "You're hurt, human. Let me heal you." He froze. The voice was soft, trembling, female, but not human. He turned slowly and saw her. She stood under the trees, half hidden in fog. Her skin was light blue, glowing slightly. Her eyes were large and silver, filled with fear. She wore a torn black robe and no shoes. Her hands were raised, not in attack but in worry. Ethan didn't know if he should run or fall to his knees. "Who are you?" he asked, breathing hard. "I won't hurt you," she said. "Please, let me help." He didn't have the strength to argue. His knees gave out. The world turned sideways as he fell. She ran to him, faster than he expected. Her hands touched his chest, and he felt warmth. Not fire, but something soft and deep, like a light inside his blood. His pain didn't go away, but it eased. His breath came easier. Her touch glowed. She looked at him with wide eyes. "You are not like the others." He tried to speak, but darkness pulled him under again. When he woke, he was lying on a soft bed of moss inside a cave. A small fire burned nearby, lighting the stone walls. His arm was wrapped in a glowing band. His leg, once bleeding, was now clean and tight in plant fiber wraps. The alien woman sat nearby, hands folded, staring at him like he might disappear. "Where am I?" he asked weakly. "Safe. For now," she whispered. He looked around. This place wasn't just a cave that had signs of life. A clay pot. A carved wooden spoon. A torn photo of a child with silver eyes. A blanket that smelled of flowers. She had been living here a long time. "Why did you help me?" he asked. She looked down. I don't know. Maybe because you looked lost." He sat up slowly. "What's your name?" "Rava," she said. "I am no one now." Her voice was low. Sad. Ethan tried to move his leg, but pain shot through it. He winced. "Thank you, Rava. I would have died without you." She turned away. "Don't thank me. If the others find out, they will kill me." "Who?" Ethan asked. "My kind. They fear me. They say I betrayed them long ago." Ethan looked at her. Why would they say that? She didn't answer. Outside, something howled in the distance. Rava jumped to her feet and grabbed a long stick, tipped with glowing stone. "They come at night," she said, whispering. "Who comes?" She didn't reply. She just stood at the mouth of the cave, guarding the dark. Ethan lay back, trying to stay awake. His body wanted to rest, but his mind was full of questions. Why did she live alone in the Forbidden Zone? What had she done that made her own people fear her? And why did she save a human? As he drifted toward sleep, he heard her voice again. "You should not have come here. This place eats the heart." But even in the cold of that strange night, Ethan didn't feel afraid, not with her nearby. He had crashed into a forbidden place. But maybe, just maybe, he had landed where he was meant to be. Ethan woke again to the soft crackle of fire and the smell of strange herbs boiling in a pot near his head. He blinked slowly as the glow from the cave walls lit Rava's face while she crushed glowing leaves between her fingers and stirred them. Into a bowl. Her long hair fell over her shoulder as she leaned closer and whispered without looking at him, "Your body still burns with infection. Drink this, it will help." Ethan took the bowl in shaky hands and drank. The taste was bitter. Earthy, but not painful warmth spread in his chest as the pain in his ribs softened. He looked around the cave, now fully awake, and saw things he had not noticed before. Paintings marked the walls. Simple drawings in red and black. Some showed stars and hands. Others showed people running from fire. He saw a worn piece of cloth with names written in a language he could not read. There was also something small, something broken. A doll carved from crystal with only one arm. He picked it up gently and turned toward Reve. "This, yours?" She froze for a second, then took it back without a word and placed it inside a stone box. She sat across from him and spoke slowly like someone walking through painful memories. "It was my daughter's. Long ago." Ethan felt his chest tighten. He opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. Rava stood and turned toward the cave's mouth. "You shouldn't stay here. The longer you are with me, the more danger follows." Ethan sat up straighter, now his voice firmer. "You saved me. I'm not leaving you." Behind Rava shook her head as the wind howled outside the cave like a scream carried across time. "You don't understand. They will come for me. They always do. They call me cursed. They call me traitor." Ethan frowned. "What did you do?" Rava's hands clenched at her sides, and she looked back at him with eyes full of something between sorrow and fire. "I healed a human once, years ago during the war, a child who had wandered from his people, bleeding, crying. I touched him with my gift and saved him. They said I betrayed our dead. They said I welcomed the enemy into our land, so they took everything. My family, my home, my name." Ethan's breath caught as he tried to picture her back then, young, brave, kind, and punished for a single act of mercy. "So you came here, into the forbidden zone?" She nodded and sat again, her voice low and shaking. "This place is full of ghosts, creatures that crawl through trees and feed on fear. No one dares enter, so I hide where no one follows." Ethan leaned forward, resting his hand over hers. "Without thinking, you are not a traitor. You are a healer." Rava looked at his hand but didn't pull away. Her fingers trembled, then slowly stilled beneath his. He noticed her arms bore faded marks, old scars, like lashes burned into her skin. He did not ask how they got there. She stood again, this time without fear. "Come, I want to show you something." He followed her through a narrow tunnel that twisted deep into the earth. Roots dangled from the ceiling, and glowing blue insects buzzed gently around them like living stars. Finally, they reached a chamber so large Ethan gasped. It was like a temple carved in secret. In the center stood a crystal well filled with glowing water. It sang, not with sound but feeling, a soft hum that moved inside the chest like memory. Hava stepped beside it and placed her hand over the surface. "This is the heart water. Old as this world. It gives healing, but takes part of your soul each time you use it." She looked at him now with a deep sadness in her voice. "I used it too many times, for strangers, for those I loved, for those who hated me. Now it only sings sorrow." Ethan looked down into the well and saw not his reflection but flashes of war, fire, children crying, Rava kneeling over a broken body. He turned away, heart heavy. "You are stronger than they know." Rava's eyes met his, and for a moment something passed between them, something silent, something unspoken. Then she turned quickly and began walking back through the tunnel. But Ethan paused. He heard something, a whisper on the wind, not from Rava, not from the cave. It was outside, far, but moving closer, voices strange and angry. "Too many to count." He hurried after her. "Vasamine is coming." She froze, then ran to the entrance and looked out into the black night. Her body shook. "They found me." Again she turned to Ethan and whispered, "If they catch me, they will kill us both." Ethan looked into her silver eyes and made a choice. "Then let's not let them catch you." As Rava stared at him, her lips parted, unsure, but then she nodded. Once and together, they vanished into the mist of the forbidden zone, not as healer and stranger, as two hunted souls, now running side by side. The night fell heavy on the land as a strange chill moved through the trees like breath from an ancient beast. Rava stood outside the cave with her long robe swaying gently while Ethan hid behind a thick wall of stone, watching her face closely. She could feel them in the wind, not with her ears, but with her blood. "They are close," she whispered without turning. "I can feel their hate." Ethan stepped forward, his jaw clenched and voice steady. "Then we fight. We don't run." Rava looked at him slowly, her eyes glowing silver in the moonlight, and her voice soft like a forgotten song. "You would fight your own kind for me." Ethan nodded without hesitation. "You saved me. Now I stand with you, no matter what comes." She looked at the ground for a moment, then reached into her satchel, pulling out a long metal shard wrapped in leather. It was once part of a blade broken long ago, but still sharp. "Take this," she said. "You will need it." Ethan gripped the weapon and felt its weight. Not heavy but real, like a promise. Suddenly a sharp sound echoed through the valley. A howl. No, a horn, deep and rough like something carved from the bones of giants. Rava grabbed Ethan's hand and pulled him back into the cave. "They cannot find the entrance, but they will search the trees, and they will burn everything." Ethan looked at her. "Why do they hunt you so badly?" "You are not a danger to them." Rava's voice shook with pain as she answered. "Because I remind them of what they did, of what they lost, of the love they buried to follow orders. Because I did not choose hate like they did." Cave trembled as boots struck the ground above. Voices rose in sharp commands, and crackling laughter light spilled in through cracks. Not moonlight, firelight. They were setting torches. Ethan looked around quickly and spotted a narrow path hidden behind crates and blankets. "Where does that lead?" Rava shook her head. "It goes deeper, into the dark tunnels. Even I have not walked far that way." "Then we have no choice. We go now." She hesitated for just one breath, then followed him. Tunnel was tight, the walls covered in roots and old markings that glowed faintly under their steps behind them. The cave entrance exploded with noise, shouting, stomping, metal scraping rock. They were inside. Norhava squeezed Ethan's hand tighter as they moved. Then a new sound came, one that made her freeze. A voice, deep and cruel. One she knew well. "Rava, come out. No more hiding. No more shame." Ethan looked at her face and saw her skin go pale, her mouth tremble, her eyes go empty. "Who is that?" he whispered. She answered in a whisper that carried more sorrow than fears. "Even. He was once my friend. Then he became something else. He was the one who told them I had healed the child. He was the one who dragged me from my home and watched them take everything." Ethan turned and gripped her shoulder. "Then this ends tonight." They moved deeper until they reached a wide hollow filled with strange crystals jutting from the floor. Light pulsed under their feet like a heartbeat. Rava stepped forward and raised her hands. The crystals responded, glowing. Brighter, then dimmer, then brighter again. Ethan stared in amazement. "What is this?" Placer Hava spoke calmly. "Now this is where the old healers came when they were lost. The crystals listen. They remember pain. They store it. They turn it into light." Suddenly footsteps echoed down the tunnel behind them. Zivan entered with 2 armed scouts beside him, their weapons drawn, eyes burning. He laughed when he saw her. "There you are, the broken widow, still hiding in caves, still playing with dead magic." Rava stood tall now. "I will not run again." Zivan pointed his blade at Ethan. "And what is this?" "Another human you saved. How many more will you betray us for?" Ethan stepped in front of her. "She betrayed no one. She healed while you destroyed." Zivan's smile faded. "Kill the human. Bring the widow back alive. The elders want to see her suffer." The 2 scouts rushed forward. Rava raised both hands and the crystals pulsed red, sending a shock through the tunnel that threw both scouts backward like leaves in a storm. Ethan charged at Zivan with the broken blade. Their weapons clashed, metal against metal, sparks flying. Zivan was stronger, but Ethan was faster. He ducked a wild swing and drove the blade into Zivan's shoulder. The older warrior roared and fell back. Rava stood over him now, her hands glowing, but not with healing, with memory. She touched his head And Zaven screamed as the pain he had caused flooded back into him. Every cry, every wound, every betrayal. He said Rava turned to wail. Let him carry his shame. Ethan took her hand again. Come, we must keep moving. Rava looked back only once before they vanished into the lower tunnel, and the crystals behind them sang a low soft note, like sorrow leaving the stone asterisk. The tunnel walls whispered with old voices as Ethan and Rava moved deeper into the earth, with only the soft light of the crystals behind them fading into shadows. Rava walked slowly, her steps weak, her hands trembling, as if the fight had drained something inside her. Ethan kept close, watching her carefully as she leaned against the tunnel wall. With every few steps, she stopped suddenly and fell to her knees, her breath coming fast, her head low. He knelt beside her and placed his hand gently on her shoulder. You gave too much again, didn't you? Rava nodded, her voice low and tired. The memory spell takes from the soul. It shows what they hide, but it breaks me a little more each time. Ethan looked around the tunnel walls, then helped her up carefully. We need rest. You need to heal yourself now. She smiled faintly through her pain. I do not heal myself. Never did. Never could. I was taught to give, not to take. Ethan shook his head as he guided her toward a small alcove in the rock that looked like a natural resting place, with smooth stone and dry floor. You gave enough. Now let someone give back. He helped her lie down and placed his jacket under her head. Then he stepped back and looked at her. Her face glowed softly, even in weakness, and her eyes blinked, slowly watching him with something more than gratitude. She whispered after a moment of silence, why do you still stay with me? You know what I carry, what I bring. Ethan crouched beside her and held her hand gently. Because you saved me without asking why. Because you listened when I had no voice. Because I see you, Rava, not what they called you. Her eyes filled with something like warmth and fear mixed together. She turned her head and whispered, it has been so long since someone looked at me without judgment. Ethan sat down next to her, his back against the wall. Tell me about your daughter, the one whose doll you kept. Rava's lips parted, and her voice came like a distant breeze. Her name was Lyra. She had hair like firelight and a laugh that shook the leaves from the trees. Loved the stars, would draw them in the sand and name each one. When they took me away, they told me she would forget me, that she would be raised without my curse. But I know she cried for me. I know she reached for me, and I was not there. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest as he listened to the pain woven through every word. He wanted to say something, but no words felt strong enough. Instead, he reached into his pouch and pulled out a small broken charm, something from his own crash, something he kept as a reminder of what he lost. He placed it in her hand. He carried this for luck, but maybe you need it more. Rava looked at the charm, then at Ethan. Thank you for sharing your pain, for sharing your presence. Ethan leaned back and closed his eyes. They sat in silence for a while, with only the soft hum of the earth below. Then a sound broke the quiet. Not loud, but close footsteps, soft, careful. Ethan stood fast, his hand on the broken blade. But Rava placed a hand on his arm and shook her head. No, not enemy. I know that sound. That is the sound of a seeker. A seeker, Ethan asked, someone who does not hunt to harm, but searches for truth. Someone like I used to be. Moments later, a figure stepped into the glow of the tunnel. She was tall and cloaked in deep green, her eyes bright and alert, her skin marked with the same light patterns as Rava. Rova stood slowly, her body shaking. Zirin, is that you? Cloaked figure stepped forward. I thought you were dead. We heard this sentence. We saw the smoke from the exile fire, but I never believed you did. Rava walked forward and the two women embraced softly. Ethan watched, unsure but calm. Siren looked at him and then back at Rava. You trust a human? Rava nodded without fear. He is not like the others. He did not take. He gave a Siren studied Ethan with sharp eyes, then gave a small respectful nod. Then he is part of the bond now, and must be protected. She turned and pointed toward a higher tunnel. There is a way out, but it is narrow and watched by the eyes of the flame watchers. If we pass through, they may not follow. Rava took Ethan's hand again and looked into his eyes. We go forward together, not because we must, but because we choose. Ethan squeezed her hand and nodded. Let's move. One step at a time they followed Siren into the new path, leaving behind the place of memories and pain, and for the first time in years, Rava walked with someone beside her, not chasing, not judging, but healing the healer with every breath. The tunnel twisted like the inside of a serpent, its walls growing hotter with every step, the air turning dry and sharp. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead as he followed behind. Rava and Siren, the light from their skin barely enough to guide the way they had been walking for hours through tight spaces, where even breathing felt like a task. Siren stopped and pointed upward toward a thin crack in the rock. Exit is near, but we must pass the flame watchers now. Ethan looked up at the narrow gap and saw a flicker of red light dancing across the edges. He turned to Rava, who nodded slowly. We climb and we run. If they spot us, we do not stop. Ethan placed his hands against the warm stone and began to climb, his boots slipping slightly on the smooth rock, but he kept moving, pulling himself higher until his fingers touched fresh air. He peeked out and saw a strange open space above it. Was a valley filled with ash and flame, with broken machines and burning trees scattered across the ground. Like bones at the far end of the valley stood tall figures with glowing masks and long staffs burning at the tip. Did not speak, they only stood watching the valley like statues of fire. Ethan climbed out fully and helped Rava and Siren up behind him. They crouched behind a half-buried metal hull, Rava's breath fast and uneven. I remember this place, she whispered. This is where they brought the broken, where they burned the names from our flesh. Ethan stared at her arm where faint scars still curled across her skin. You do not have to go through this alone anymore, he said. Siren scanned the valley and pointed toward a narrow path behind a broken tower. That way. If we move fast, we can reach the river. Rava stood tall, her voice steady. Then let us move before they see our shadows. They sprinted across the valley, moving low and quiet, their feet silent against the blackened earth. Ethan kept one hand on his blade, his other ready to catch Rava if she stumbled. The watchers did not move, but their burning eyes turned slowly, tracking the smallest motion. Then a noise broke the silence, a soft crunch of stone underfoot. Siren had stepped on a cracked panel, and it shattered beneath her. One of the watchers turned its head sharply and raised its staff. A line of fire burst from the ground, blocking their path. Run! Siren shouted as she pushed Rava forward and turned to face the watcher. Ethan grabbed Rava's hand and pulled her through the smoke as more watchers lit their staves and began to move. They ran without looking back, jumping over scorched debris and ducking under low beams as fire chased their heels. Another blast hit the wall beside them, throwing Ethan to the ground. Rava turned and dropped beside him, her hands glowing as she pressed them to his chest. Breathe. Stay awake. Stay with me. Ethan gasped as her energy poured into him, his pain fading enough to stand again. Took her hand once more, and they ran toward the river, now visible ahead like a silver thread in the darkness. The watchers stopped at the valley's edge, their fire staves lowering slowly as if bound by ancient rule. Siren met them at the river, her cloak singed and her eyes wide. They cannot follow across water, she said. This river is sacred. It marks the land of the forgotten. Rava dropped to her knees beside the water, her fingers shaking as she touched the surface. This is where I once begged for death. Now I return with someone who gave me life. Ethan crouched beside her, his voice soft. We are not finished yet, but we made it through the fire. She looked at him, her silver eyes glowing with something more than light. You have burned your path beside mine, even when you did not have to. Siren watched them both, then spoke. We are not safe yet, but you have crossed what few dare, and that has meaning. They followed the river, now walking along its edge as the land turned from ash to stone, from stone to moss, and from moss to life. Strange flowers opened as they passed, their petals humming in colors unseen by normal eyes. Rava reached out and touched one gently. This land still remembers love. Even after flame. Ethan looked ahead and saw the outline of a small village, hidden in a canyon where lights blinked like stars caught in the trees. What is that? He asked Siren. where the exiled dream. Where the broken are whole again. Rava squeezed Ethan's hand, her grip stronger now. Then let us walk without fear. For once I do not feel alone. They moved forward together, past fire, past scars, past silence. The river sang beside them, carrying the sound of hope into the night. The sky above Haven was filled with strange lights moving, like slow stars across the night, as if watching from far beyond the cloud. Ethan stood beside Rava, at the edge of the village, both silent as the wind carried the scent of herbs and soil, and something warm, like peace. The villagers stepped out slowly, their faces cautious, their eyes wide as they looked at the strangers approaching from the river path. They saw Rava first, and many gasped, some stepping back, others falling to their knees. Whispering words in their old tongues. Ren raised her hand and spoke with a clear voice. She has returned, not as prisoner, not as traitor, but as truth-bearer and survivor and healer. Whispers turned to quiet cries as older women and young children came closer, touching Rava's robe as if to check she was real. An elder stepped forward, his back bent with age, but his voice strong and sharp. You left marked by shame, and now return holding hands with a human. Why should we believe you are not here to bring ruin? Rava stepped forward, her voice soft but steady. Because I have nothing left to hide. I have carried exile in my bones and silence in my throat. I have wandered through flame and shadow, and now I carry only truth. The elder narrowed his eyes. Then speak your truth, and let the stones judge your words. The villagers formed a circle around them, a sacred custom from long ago, where only truth could be spoken, and no one could interrupt. Rava stood in the center and began. Long ago, I was chosen to be a healer, one of the youngest in my tribe, and proud to carry the gift. I was told to use it for our people, only never for outsiders, never for those the elders called unworthy. But one day I found a child, a human boy no older than 10, bleeding under a tree, his body broken and cold. He was crying, not in hate but in fear. My hands moved before my mind. Did I healed him not because he was human, but because he was alive. For that the elders took my name. They burned my house. They told my daughter I had died. They dragged me to the fire and left me in the forbidden zone. For years I lived with ghosts. I buried my voice. I let the world forget me, but I never forgot what it meant to be a healer. And now here I stand, not because I seek forgiveness, but because I carry something greater than pain. I carry the bond I made with this human, who saw me not as cursed, but as someone worth saving. He did not run when I was weak. He did not turn away when they came for me. He gave without asking, and stayed when it was easier to leave. The elder looked at Ethan. And you, human, what do you carry that makes you stand beside her? Ethan stepped into the circle and raised his voice so all could hear. I was a soldier sent to deliver cargo, nothing more. My ship crashed in your land. I was broken, bleeding, and lost. She found me when no one else would. She gave me warmth when the world turned cold. I do not speak your language or follow your customs, but I know what it means to owe your life to someone who expects nothing in return. She healed me, and through her I learned what healing truly means. It means choosing kindness even when the world rewards cruelty. The elder lowered his gaze and spoke again. There's a child here born with weak lungs, her breath shallow, her nights filled with struggle. If you are still healer, then prove it now, not with words, but with your hands. Rava stepped forward without pause, her fingers glowing faintly as she knelt beside the child, resting on a woven mat, her skin pale, her chest rising slowly like waves losing strength. Rava placed her hands on the girl's chest and closed her eyes. Glow from her palms spread into the child like soft lightning, weaving light into breath and breath into life. Girl gasped, her eyes fluttered open, and color returned to her cheeks as she sat up and looked around. The crowd fell silent. Then the elder dropped to one knee and bowed his head. We judged in blindness and acted in fear. We see now that healing is not weakness and love is not betrayal. He turned to villagers and spoke once more. Let the name Rava be restored. Let her walk freely among us, and let the human who stood with her be honored as one of our own. Tears filled Rava's eyes, but she held Ethan's hand tighter, her voice barely above a whisper. I Thought I had lost everything, but I found something greater than forgiveness. I found my voice again, Ethan smiled and whispered back, and I found my purpose as the village bells rang under the night sky. Two souls once broken now stood whole side by side under the gaze of stars that finally saw truth. The sun rose over Haven, casting soft golden light across the hills, while the wind carried a scent of fresh blossoms through the quiet village. Children played near the river where once fire chased broken souls, while elders sat in circles sharing warm tea and watching with eyes that had seen too much pain. In the center of the village, Rava stood with Ethan at her side, both wrapped in robes woven by the villagers' hands, symbols of peace, stitched across the fabric like blessings whispered by ancestors. Rava's face held calm, but her eyes searched the horizon as if waiting for something more than silence. Ethan leaned closer, his voice low. You have your home back and your name. What? Rava looked toward the hills where smoke once rose and the sound of war had stained the sky. Now I must do what I was meant to do, not just for one human, not just for one child, but for all who were broken and left to suffer. Siren approached carrying a scroll marked with the seal of the forgotten council, her voice clear and strong. The elders have agreed to rebuild the circle of healers. They wish you to lead it. Rava, with your truth, with your scars, with your heart. Rava held the scroll gently, her fingers tracing the seal as if it were a memory made solid. She nodded once and looked at Ethan. Will you stay if I choose this path? Ethan smiled, his eyes steady. I will walk wherever your path leads, even if it means standing in the shadow so you can shine. The villagers gathered in the square as Rava stepped onto the stone platform. The same place where she had once been cast out now turned into a place of rebirth. She raised her hand and the crowd grew silent. I do not ask you to forget what happened. I ask you to remember with open hearts, to carry our scars not as shame, but as proof that we survived. I ask you to see beyond tribe, beyond blood, beyond fear, and choose the same thing. I chose what I found, a human dying at my feet, to heal, not to hate. A soft murmur moved through the crowd, like wind through leaves. Then a voice called out from the back, strong and full of emotion, show us what healing looks like, and we will follow. Rava turned to Ethan and extended her hand. He stepped forward and placed his hand in hers, their bond glowing faintly between their palms. Not magic, not power, just trust made visible together. They walked through the village and into the wilds where broken machines lay buried under moss and rust, and trees whispered stories from before the war. They found a group of nomads along the way, alien wanderers with tired eyes and wounded limbs, living in fear of both humans and their own kin. Rava knelt before them and offered water, herbs, and words. You are not forgotten, you are not cursed, you are needed. Ethan gave the children food from his pack and played games with them until their laughter returned like birds finding their song again. Every village they passed joined the movement, not through command, not through law, but through choice, through hope. They called it the Walk of Light, and it stretched across the scarred lands like a healing wound, closing day by day. One evening, Rava sat beside a fire surrounded by those she had helped. Her robe now covered with symbols drawn by many hands. She looked at Ethan, who leaned back watching the stars. Do you ever miss the world you came from? Ethan turned to her, his smile gentle. Sometimes. But then I look around and see the lives we touched, and I know I am exactly where I belong. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and for a while they listened to the wind and the soft breath of sleeping children nearby. The next morning a messenger arrived with a child no older than 5, with deep eyes and a voice that trembled. My mother is sick, no one can help. Please come. Rava stood without hesitation, gathering her things and taking the child's hand. Ethan followed without question. They arrived at a small broken home where the mother lay barely breathing, her skin pale, her pulse fatting. Rava placed her hands on the woman's chest, her energy dim from long days, but still warm and steady. She whispered, not in spells, not in chants, but in truth. Are not alone, you are not forgotten, you are loved. Light passed from her palms into the woman's heart, and slowly color returned, breath returned, life returned. The child cried and held his mother tight, while Rava stepped back, leaning against Ethan, you give so much, he whispered. And yet you still have more, because I am no longer alone. She answered, because someone believed in me when I was afraid to believe in myself as the sun rose again. Rava walked ahead, leading a line of healers behind her. Her steps sure, her hands open. She had no weapons, no armor, only her truth and the choice. She made every day to heal, not to hate, and the world began to follow.